One of the cool things about being a double major is that it allows one to have a multifaceted perspective on things. I'm a double major in communication and psychology. My psychology major has taught me a lot about the intricacies and idiosyncrasies of the human mind. For example, narcissism is a fascinating topic that I've spent more time researching on my own than for any of my psychology courses. I'm going to share some narcissist terminology with you just to help you understand where I'm going with all this. I'll start with cognitive dissonance. The narcissist's externalized, manufactured identity is built on lies and denial, and she expects her family members to accept her version of the truth. What this means for the narcissist's spouse and children is that they find themselves in opposite land, where she tells them, usually through a range of manipulative tactics, that reality is different from, or even the opposite of what they feel and perceive. The narcissist produces a cognitive dissonance in others who experience a profoundly disorienting gap between what they perceive and what the narcissist says happened. Black is white, good is bad, false is true. Particularly in young children, cognitive dissonance is extremely traumatic, leading to self-doubt and disassociation. An example of this would be when a feminist professor teaches her class that we live in a society that promotes rape culture. Even though all physical evidence points to the contrary, convictions, prison sentences, permanent sex offender status, etc., the narcissist will cause you to question what you see right before your eyes. Next, there's devaluation. Because of their emotionally primitive, perfect or worthless thinking, stuck at the developmental level of a young child, and their insistence on unattainable perfection, narcissists in relationships with partners, family members, or friends nearly inevitably become disillusioned. And because they lack a moral compass, again, like the stunted children they are, they do not hesitate to experience their disappointment in a range of devaluing hostile behaviors, including judgment, belittlement, rage, if not outright abandonment. An example of this would be a feminist professor telling her version of a story which involves her fiancé from the Dominican Republic calling off their wedding because his family members, unjustifiably, have something against said feminist professor. Rather than looking within to search for character flaws that need correcting, which would be a confession of imperfection, the narcissist will always point the finger and lay blame at the feet of anybody else but themselves. Moving right along, we've got narcissistic rage. Narcissistic personalities often react with rage if their narcissist injury is triggered. They take even the smallest slight, which most people would easily brush off as intense humiliation and or rejection. When this happens, their fabricated perfect self and overblown feelings of entitlement are threatened, setting off a wild rage response. Narcissistic rage is terrifying, sometimes physically violent, and far beyond normal anger. It's emotionally and physically traumatizing for those on the receiving end, particularly children, who naturally blame themselves for adults' reactions. An example of this would be when a men's rights activist student continuously asks a feminist professor for documented proof of her claims, only to get an overblown, New York ghetto-style in-your-face overreaction. Narcissistic rage is the result of a narcissist being unmasked. Next, we've got one of my favorites, flying monkeys. Like the flying monkeys who served the Wicked Witch of the West in The Wizard of Oz, flying monkeys are enablers who help with the narcissist's dirty work, often to avoid being targeted themselves, and or to benefit from a certain level of bestowed privilege. The most manipulable types make the best flying monkeys. They may be children or relatives or even students. An example of this would be when a feminist professor can't get over her narcissistic rage at being unmasked. Therefore, she charismatically and continuously mentions the men's rights activist individual who unmasked her in the most unflattering way possible, thus amassing an entire horde of feeble-minded flying monkeys to do the trash talking for her. Last but most certainly not least, there's the smear campaign. Narcissists engage in smear campaigns to discredit others within their family or social spheres. Narcissists may smear another person because that person sees through their mask. They are trying to conceal preemptively their own abuse of that person, or they're taking revenge because the person offended or rejected them. Narcissists may conduct a smear campaign for lesser reasons, such as jealousy or resentment. Narcissists can be quite calculating in their process of discrediting and socially isolating their target, using innuendo, gossip, and outright lies to family, friends, neighbors, and community members. Narcissists won't hesitate to smear an ex to their children, a scapegoated child to friends and relatives, or a colleague to other colleagues. The smear campaign usually happens behind the victim's back, often with the assistance of the narcissist's enablers or flying monkeys. An example of this would be a feminist professor telling an unflattering story of her brother who happens to live in a tent. Another example would be a feminist professor who tells a story of being victimized by a superior at La Guardia Community College, painting her superior in the most unflattering light possible, rather than entertain the possibility that she could be accountable for that altercation as well. Yet another example would be the men's rights activist student who unmasked the feminist professor, and the concerted efforts made on her part to smear the reputation of said men's rights activist student. If any of my examples sound familiar to you, and if I appear to be talking about someone specific, it's because I am. If the person I'm referring to is watching this video, and eventually you will, don't worry, I won't drop your name. Not like the way you've been dropping mine. But I will accurately describe the heck out of you. Once again, you're being unmasked. Professional psychologists would say to never purposefully expose a narcissist because the ensuing rage could be catastrophic. Well, I'm not a licensed professional yet. Furthermore, you know my background. You know the environment in which I was raised. Do you honestly believe you have what it takes to hurt a man like me? Anyone who becomes a narcissist's flying monkey has proven to be nothing more than a feeble-minded follower. And I'll never lament the opinions of feeble-minded people. Once again, I won't drop any names. If you fall within the category of flying monkey, you know who you are. Also, there are many of you who don't even know who I am, and a select few who I consider my friends. I'm not dropping any names. You know who you are as well. Plus, there is at least one among you who pretends to be friendly with me while in my present, but doesn't have my best interests in mind. I see you, little two-faced cherub. Moving back to the narcissistic feminist professor, it's interesting how often those two dysfunctions, narcissism and feminism, exist comorbidly within the same individual. I just wanted to say, when I walk across that stage in May to collect my 2 diplomas, with my head held high, that's when you're going to realize that all your efforts to create a smear campaign against me and to amass your army of character-deficient flying monkeys didn't amount to jack shit. Now, let's see more of that narcissistic rage. This is Eli, 2019. Peace.